Welcome back. So I saw this the other day and thought to myself, okay, China, countries do military parades, but the thing that, of course, was so different about this one that China just had, first of all, was their largest military parade ever that they'd staged. And second of all, I think most notable is the fact that along with Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un on that stage sharing that moment as he observed the troops, the military, and all this new weaponry, much of it I don't think had been seen up until now, which a lot of people, in reading some of the reports on this, described as you're looking at a new world order here. This is pushback, right? China making it very obvious here that this is pushback against the West, or specifically perhaps against Donald Trump. And then Donald Trump posting on his own social media feed on Truth Social, first of all, saying he was disappointed that the Chinese, because this marked the end of the Second World War 80 years later, did not thank America, number one, for their role in ending the war. That upset him enough. And then said, referring to the three leaders on that stage, just saying hi to the Chinese leader and the other two leaders there, conspiring against America. And I thought, that's a pretty aggressive tone, but then again, maybe we shouldn't be surprised. Ultimately, my question is what are we seeing here? Is this, in fact, as some are describing it, a new world order? Is there reason for concern here? Peace versus aggression? Charles Burton is a former diplomat at Canada's embassy in Beijing and a senior fellow at the Sinopsis think tank, and he's on the line. Mr. Burton, first of all, thank you for your time this afternoon. Let me begin by asking you, when you saw this, what were you thinking?
Well, you expect if there's a commemoration of the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War and China's defeat of the Japanese, that the tone would be being a memorial for the people that were sacrificed in this terrible war. China lost 35 million people over the period of the Japanese occupation, which precedes our Second World War. The Japanese were there from 1931 on. But what we got was this display of awesome implements of destruction, as you said, stealth bombers roaring over into the sky and every kind of missile and anti-cyber apparatus and so on, And so instead of them commemorating the memory of the victims of the war, it seemed that Mr. Xi was alluding to a future war. And he actually said in his speech, instead of mourning the dead on both sides, mankind is faced with the choice of peace or war, dialogue or confrontation, win-win or zero-sum, and that China will not be intimidated by bullies. And I think that you read that as Mr. Trump. So, it looks like China seeing America withdrawing from its role as the leader of the world and severely alienating pretty much every country in the world from respect for the Americans because of what the Americans are doing in terms of devastating economies through tariffs and then their sudden withdrawal of foreign aid throughout the world, leaving a lot of third world countries in desperate straits with regard to health projects, particularly women and children, that, China says, well, this is our chance to rise up and become the new global hegemon. And this event with Putin and Kim Jong-un standing next to Xi Jinping in somewhat subordinate positions, and 25 other autocrats from around the world watching this display of military might, seems to be suggesting that we could be looking at the formation of a new kind of NATO involving, the other side. And so it was really quite disturbing. And I think the idea that Donald Trump is leading to a new world order which is hostile to the ideals of equal sovereignty and justice and fair trade does seem to have some presence. And, this has always been China's ambition to achieve what's called the community of the common destiny of mankind, which is a China-dominated world which abandons the principles of the United Nations and the WTO and all of those institutions that maintain justice and prosperity globally up to now.
Well, it's a remarkable explanation. But as I hear you, say this, I think to myself, if this has been their ambition for quite some time, and does this go back, first of all, beyond Xi Jinping, because he's not been in power that long? And if that's the case, is this all on Donald Trump? Why was this never the case before? Why do they feel now the need or the responsibility to show the world, hey, look at us and look who's in our back pocket?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it goes back to really 2017, after he came into power in 2012 and then fully consolidated by 2017, and then proposed this community of the common destiny of mankind doctrine at a major speech that he gave to a Communist Party Congress. And he was anticipating that the U.S. was a weakening power and that China would be able to continue to strengthen and rise to fill the vacuum. It just seems that maybe Donald Trump has kind of hastened the discourse, and she sees this as his moment to try and get the support of nations throughout the world for a new world order based on China and moving away from the United States. So, in the course of the meeting in Shanghai of a number of these leaders before the military parade, he was promising developmental aid to those nations to fill the gap which the U.S. has created. And he claims that China will respect the universally recognized basic norms governing international relations, the purposes and principles of the UN Charter, and ensure the equal and uniform application of international law and international rules. So basically, he's saying, I'm exactly everything that Donald Trump isn't. So, you should come with us. Of course, this is complete nonsense. China's plan goes right against the purposes and principles of the UN Charter, but maybe there's some nations, maybe including Canada, that would say, well, China wants to be a responsible stakeholder in global affairs, and we can trust that they've made a fundamental change in their attitude towards how the world should be structured.
How does this play out? I realize that's a difficult question to answer, but you have Donald Trump, who apparently, using the words conspire, referring to those three main leaders on stage yesterday. This idea too, as you pointed out, of it's peace or war, according to Xi Jinping. There are a lot of people who might look at this and say, is this really where we're heading? Could there be a showdown between these two nuclear powers? Because if that was the case, we're pretty much all done here, I think.
Well, certainly the point of the military parade is to suggest that if there was a war, that China could win. And, the kind of flashpoint that you're looking at is Taiwan and the South China Sea. Canada has been quite active in freedom of navigation exercise in the South China Sea and in waters that China has illegitimate claim now to be Chinese territory. They've basically taken it over as their own lake. And China, particularly Mr. Xi, wants to see the end of the democratic government on Taiwan because, maybe that's his mandate as a leader. He'll make his way in history to be the Chinese leader that brought Taiwan back into the embrace of the motherland, for one thing. And the other thing is that Taiwan is a vibrant democracy with citizens' rights and freedom of expression, association, and really, in a lot of ways, quite comparable to Canada in the way it's structured and run. It has free and fair elections. It respects gender rights. It's taking action on climate change and so on. And that's an embarrassment to the Chinese
that's
regime.
anathema to the Chinese, right? Is it not?
Yeah, it really is. China, it has done for China what the Chinese people would aspire to.
Right.
But what Mr. Xi says, that's not consistent with Chinese culture. Chinese culture is about strong, authoritarian rule of man, as in the period of the emperors. And Taiwan, as a Chinese place based on Chinese culture, is showing that this is nonsense, that you can have a democracy and still be a place that's imbued in the Chinese culture.
I have to wrap up. Just as a final question, given what we saw, given this display of weapons, some of which I think I said had not yet been seen, where do you think we go from here? Is this over? This will be forgotten in a week, or did this change, do you think, the relationship between China and the U.S.? Because now the U.S. realizes, hey, they're not kidding around anymore. I'm putting it that way. What do you think the next step here is?
Well, of course, we're dealing with Mr. Trump, and he's easily offended. So, he may feel that this is something of an insult to him, that there was a gathering of world leaders and he wasn't invited. And so the U.S. might become more aggressive in trying to put Mr. Xi back in his place. It seems that the tariffs imposed on China may not work, and Mr. Trump doesn't like to see anything that looks like he hasn't had a great victory every time. So, but I would like America to recognize that their reputation, influence, and prestige is taking a considerable hit, and they need to turn things around to regain the respect of the world by acting in a way which is honest, fair, and just in international relations. And right now we're not seeing that.
Mr. Burton, I thank you so much for your time and insight. Very much appreciate it.
Good to speak with you, Aaron.
Charles Burton,